This hangout on air is live. All right, after a lot of trials and tribulations here with Google Hangouts, we're live on the air. I'm Peter Duke, and I'm here with Charles C. Johnson, editor of GotNews. How's it going, Charles?
Going very well. I'm very excited to launch this now.
Me too, after a little bit of struggling. So what's going on in the news world this week, Charles? Air is live. All right, after a lot of trials and tribulations.
Hold on, I'm getting some weird feedback here. Hold on.
You have a window open, Duke, and probably that Google Plus page. And if you close it, then you'll be in better shape. Did I lose you? Oh, so much for our first inaugural broadcast. Let me see if I can add you back there. Oop, he's coming back.
I'm back. Sorry about that. Can you see me?
Yes, but I can't see your lower third.
All right, I'll put the lower third up right now. So yes, it's been quite an eventful week thus far with Brian Williams in the news. And now he apparently is taking a leave of absence, thanks in part to the reporting we did at GotNews, also the work of Super Mexican, who's a blogger, as well as the great reporting of the people at Stars and Stripes. And it's really kind of impressive what's gone on here, because I think it's the culmination of a lot of trends going on in the media right now. The sort of instantaneous fact-checking, the sort of exciting going after kind of big players. I mean, we shouldn't underestimate how much money and how much was, how much kind of exciting stuff was out there beforehand, and how we've kind of gotten Brian Williams finally taken off the air. It's pretty exciting.
So how do you think the non-traditional media has participated in this whole Brian Williams thing?
Well, what's interesting about it is, we were some of the first people to really go after this, and what I tweeted out before anybody else. Let me get the exact tweet just so I have it right. But basically, we said that he made up, or I said that he made up some of his earlier reporting. And I said, are we going to just ignore all this stuff that he made up? And so I wrote an article about it, February 4th, saying busted on tape. On tape, Brian Williams made up a lot of stuff during his Katrina coverage. Then I followed it up with more stuff about the bodies, and it was just kind of exciting. It's a very kind of exciting moment right now because we're taking them out, and it's very, very kind of fun. And
I think you need to stop reading while you're.
Yeah, no, it's a good
while
point.
you're trying to
I'm being
speak.
attacked right now by Ben Howe.
So here's the deal.
I'm going to invite him into the podcast.
Stop paying attention to Ben Howe. Just look.
Okay.
Because you come off as a.
I come off as a crazy person, huh? All right. So basically, we're very excited right now because this is the beginning of a really new stage in broadcast media, and it's a very stuff like the GotNews podcast, stuff like the Twitter fact checkers, stuff like GotNews.com, stuff like bloggers like Super Mexican. What we're all doing right now is we've essentially just taken a guy who has a 5-year contract, who gets paid $10 million a year, who is a kind of watchword in TV news, and what we've done is we've basically taken him and ended his career. Now they might say, oh well, he'll be back, which is always the case, but he's being routinely mocked on social media, and it's really kind of amazing, just to see all this attention, not just by left-wing, not just by right-wing people, but also by left-wing people, by comedians. It's really it's exciting, and I think it's a sign of things to come.
See, I'm not sure that he's really gone. I mean, I kind of come from the Neil Postman school of attention. And I think that if he's not meeting with Lorne Michaels right now and trying to figure out how to turn this thing into a giant joke, I mean, I can imagine, if not tonight, a week from tonight, Saturday Night Live with John Lovitz and Morgan Fairchild, with Brian Williams slow jamming The Crisis with Jimmy Fallon, and kind of taking an entire 90 minutes of Saturday Night Live to turn this entire thing into a joke, so that he can return to the news the following Monday, having laughed it all off and moving forward. I'm just not sure that, you know, the double-edged sword of the Columbia Journalism School code of ethics holds anymore. And I think that people believe what they want to believe, and we'll see if this really ends him or not.
Well, we'll see. I mean, my sense is that it probably will end him, though. I mean, he's a joke now. Now, it's one thing to be sort of Dan Rather and go run around the college circuit giving speeches about the way it used to be. But he's an embarrassment and a joke, and it's going to take a lot to get back that credibility. I mean, one of the things that we've kind of learned at GotNews is that credibility is very much a finite commodity on the internet. If everyone can publish, then really there's sort of this fight over credibility, over making arguments, and so my basic sense is that he's finished. Now he may come back in some form or another, but his kind of sterling reputation. I mean, we haven't even published all the videos we have at GotNews from various things that Brian Williams has made up about himself, about his career, about events that he went to. You know, we published some stuff. The Breitbart people published a version of it. We published some videos of him talking to Jon Stewart, which, you know, show that he was making up or wildly exaggerating an incident with an Israeli helicopter. We published some material showing that he said a body was floating by. Nobody, including some eyewitnesses that were there, said that there was enough water for a body to float. At most, there was a foot of water. And so it's really it's just exciting. Like, we are at a very exciting moment where, you know, essentially people in their pajamas, bloggers, new media companies, which are sort of maturing as a form of research and as a form of analysis, and we're really driving the conversation. I mean, the video that we had of Michael Eisner with Brian Williams, where he talked about seeing a body float by in a very hyperbolic statement, that video has been seen all over the world now. It's made all sorts of broadcasts. It's you know, it's been in The Guardian, the New York Daily News. It's been mentioned in the New York Times. And so really, like, what's happening is that we the bloggers, we the kind of new media companies that are forming like GotNews, we're really setting the agenda and what's covered. So what happens first is something starts to trend, right? Like this, in this particular case, we had the Brian Williams story started to trend because of some people calling him out on Facebook. And Stars and Stripes wrote it up, which is an excellent military publication. It then got a lot of attention there. And then a lot of people try to dismiss it as like, oh, it's a memory problem. It's a memory problem. Well, putting aside the question of whether or not you'd want somebody who has a faulty memory being a newscaster to begin with, putting aside that question, it then opened up an inquiry into all of his research, and that included his Katrina stuff, because there were some serious questions at the time about his reporting. Michael Brown, not the thug, but the FEMA administrator, Michael Brown called him out on his radio program, which we're going to be posting some stuff on later today. And Williams is essentially just a pathological exaggerator and fibber. Now, I can kind of understand the psychology of somebody like this. Remember, Williams doesn't have a college degree. He mentions it in every interview, how he failed to graduate college, how he's somewhat ashamed of it. Even though in this day and age, it seems like more and more people shouldn't go to college. But I think Williams is done for because he's become a joke. When I saw Conan O'Brien and I saw all these other people, I saw Matt Taibbi of the Rolling Stone magazine, which, you know, has its own history of fact-checking problems. When I saw all this, it seemed like it's just a matter of time before he was done for. And now he's going to take a hiatus. And yeah, sure, Americans love second acts, but it's really hard to get a second act if if you make stuff up, and it's very hard to do it, especially when he's going to have all this pressure on him. And there are all these people who are writing stuff saying, oh, he's not going to take a leave of absence, he's going to be fine, he's going to continue to do the news. Well, I mean, he announced it today on a Saturday, which just goes to show that there are all these people breathing down his neck.
Right.
I think right now there's a game being played. And the game being played is NBC wants to know how many other of these lies are out there. And so what they're doing is they're hoping for a delay tactic. So first they're going to do an internal investigation, even though Brian Williams himself has condemned internal investigations done by the government. As well he should, by the way, because, investigations into wrongdoing should be independent always, I think.
Didn't he also question Hillary Clinton's story about the landing her plane under sniper fire in Bosnia? Didn't he question that?
Yeah, I think he did. I haven't seen any video of that, but I'm told he did. But I haven't checked. I haven't checked this yet. And so it's been kind of exciting. I mean, look, there are all these people right now who don't want to give us at GotNews credit because I guess I in particular am sort of the bad boy of the conservative right or the conservative internet. I'm the most hated man on the internet, according to that ABC reporter. But there's a fact. I mean, the fact is that the content we were putting out significantly undermined Brian Williams. And a while back in 2008, there were all these people who, said Brian Williams said, or rather Hillary Clinton claimed that she was coming into Bosnia under sniper fire, and that this was all just kind of it was all kind of a myth. And I would wager that Brian Williams probably weighed in on that, but I haven't seen any video as yet of that.
So you've been making a lot of claims lately about the idea that you have broken a lot of these stories, and I think that there's an argument that when you're doing internet research and you find something that it's kind of there to be found, and you may be looking at it at the same time that other people are looking at it. What kind of gives you, I guess, bragging rights to say, oh, this is me, or I did this?
Well, it's the timestamps more often than not. And when people embed the content from the videos that you found, right, which they didn't find themselves, it's generally an indication that they followed you. But the timestamp is really everything. When I started tweeting about how his Katrina reporting was fake, I was really one of the first people to do that. Now, obviously, Super Mexican got a very interesting story about how Brian Williams claimed to have gotten dysentery, which is of course nonsense. And I reported the stuff about how there were bodies. That created this this truther movement of people at Talking Points Memo and at Little Green Footballs, the lesser Charles Johnson, where they said no, there was massive flooding, when in fact the person who was the general manager there, as well as the people who owned the hotel next door, said that actually there was a foot of water, and usually bodies don't float in a foot of water. So this idea that Brian Williams saw this from his apartment in the French Quarter, it's not exactly believable. It's not exactly believable to begin with. So what ends up happening is that a lot of these conversations start to splinter and they start to go kind of crazy. So whenever there's sort of a focus on a particular target, being really clear about attribution, where you found information, is extremely important. And so in this particular case, Super Mexican got part of the story. He broke part of the Katrina story before I did. I did the bodies part, which I think is an important part, which is the part that's been picked up. And no, I mean, the other people did not pull the Michael Eisner story. They're pulling directly from the GotNews YouTube channel. And so what ends up happening is that then what happens is broadcasts and various others start to run that video as if they found it on their affiliate programs or on their news stations. And when they don't give credit, it becomes harder for the bloggers or the new media companies to build a presence or build credibility. And so what they do is they're deliberately harming. In some cases, they're stealing the content. In other cases, they're deliberately harming the competitor by essentially shutting them out, and basically not using their own organizations to propagate their views. So what they'll do now, and what they've been doing to me and to GotNews, is they've been harping on everything I'll get a photo incorrect, even though there are whole New York Times correction pages about how photos are incorrect. But people will always use that as my epitaph, or try and use it as my media epitaph, when they do far worse things, like the Brian Williams story suggests. And why they do this is it's a business tactic. They can't have their audience migrate offline into the new media landscape, because first of all, no one's really figured out, us included, no one's really figured out how to make a real decent buck online, and so this is a scary proposition for them. They'd rather have, they'd rather just take the content off the internet and then expand it. Now, it is cool to have the influence, no doubt about it, to actually be able to actually influence events, but it is kind of shady and ratty when people steal the content.
Yeah. So, do you think that this is the beginning of the end for nightly news? Do you think that it kind of started, I guess, a while ago, right, with Dan Rather and the lesser Charles Johnson, and it's I guess Steve Croft, I guess, is another guy who's been busted, and it seems like people have been holding politicians to an unrealistic level for a while, but that hasn't really trickled down to journalists. And now it seems like journalists are becoming the focus of credibility in ways that they've never been accountable before.
Well, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, this is the beginning of the end of the nightly news, and good. Like, I'm in favor of that, because first of all, news should not really hit you at 6:30. I mean, Brian Williams has a number of things where he says where his family wouldn't even eat dinner until they heard Walter Cronkite say, "And that's the way it is." Which, by the way, like, let's just begin with that being kind of a messed up way. Like, you're gonna have a 30-minute program where you're gonna purport to tell everything, and that's the way it is. It's the arrogance of the New York Times too, of like all the news that's fit to print. But I think basically, yeah, this is a serious problem. Now, just earlier this week, I was visiting with somebody who was an expert on kind of basically low wattage cable, basically broadcast. And he was saying, there are hundreds and hundreds of channels that are available at lower levels in all these different communities. And then his view is that essentially that's going to replace a lot of the need for cable, and then people are going to pipe in the rest of the shows and things that they watch over the internet, which is going to decrease the cable companies, and it's going to have a serious kind of ramification on cable news and on a bunch of other kind of sides and stuff. Now, this is broadcast news, and I think basically broadcast news is untenable. I don't see...
It requires an antenna, and most people don't actually even know what an antenna is anymore.
That's right, and I mean, Brian Williams himself complains about there being hundreds and hundreds of channels, and he actually longs for the days in which there are only 3 channels. Now that makes sense, because obviously he's on one of those 3, the functional equivalent of one of those 3 channels. But this is a problem. Like, this is a problem for a republic generally, that we have, kind of mass control of the information. Now, what happens now is that the cable and the broadcast TV things, they control access, and so what they do is they basically become stenographers for power, where they relay information. But a lot of the times this is spin and basically PR, and I think basically the internet will eat modern PR. And basically what will happen, and what's increasingly starting to happen, is that larger and larger targets are being taken down by lies that they're telling. And so Hillary Clinton in the sniper fire in 2008, 2007, I think it may have been 2008. But when she was claiming she came down under sniper fire, I mean, that lie, and then showing the video of her like shaking the troops' hands, that lie ended a lot of her credibility. And she's now said things like, "Oh, well, I misspoke." And I mean, obviously the right now is dragging up a lot of her old videos to try and like make a point about how, hey, there are all these liars on the left. But there are lots of liars, on the right too. I mean, I got into a little bit of hot water by mentioning, as much as I admire Chris Kyle and think he's an American hero and a patriot, he did have a history of just making stuff up, like shooting people in the Superdome, and Katrina as a sniper. Now, I think this is really interesting because I'm sure there are statements that people can pick apart of virtually any public figure and can basically take them out if the time is right, if the audience is large enough. Um, and that creates kind of a weird dynamic because it means that all of these multi-million-dollar properties can suddenly be upended and have PR disasters all at once. And there are serious questions that this raises about the bankability of an investment in somebody like a Brian Williams.
Do you think do you think it's unrealistic or unreasonable for people to assume that people are perfect, and or is it just the fact that they present themselves as these kind of untouchable icons and then wind up not living up to their own persona that they've put out there?
Well, I think that's the issue. Is it's the persona more than anything else.
I mean, I'm certainly not I'm a flawed human being.
Indeed, as am I, as we all are. I mean,
yeah.
and there are mistakes that I've made at GotNews and mistakes I made at the Daily Caller. I mean, I always argue that we should think about this sort of thing in terms of a batting average, rather than in terms of like unimpeachable, credibility. And so, what ends up happening is that these people.
So is Brian Williams, if he's got a pretty good batting average, is this a problem with him betting on baseball? I mean, is this
Well, what I would say is that with him, and so I think of this as a batting average, and like if you get up to the plate in the major leagues and it's the final game of the World Series, and you swing and miss and you strike out and you're the slugger on the team, right? You may have a really good batting average, you may have a really good career, but everyone's going to remember that screw up you had in Game 7 of the World Series, right? So that's kind of how I see the Brian Williams scenario playing out. So this is kind of unacceptable to make up some stuff about, to make some stuff up about being in Iraq, the sort of stolen valor stuff, and Stars and Stripes has published some material. We published a bunch more material at GotNews showing that NBC actually read a book saying that they had been shot by the Iraqi Fedayeen in 2013. It was narrated by Tom Brokaw, who was the sort of master to Williams's understudy, and it raises a lot of questions. I mean, I think in the final analysis, the sort of stentorian, we tell you how it is and you just shut up and take it. It's over. Like, the game is over. And Brian Williams actually admits as much. I mean, there's an interview that he gives, or like a promo for the Nightly News, where he says, in the past it used to be we give the news onto them, but now we sort of see ourselves as part of a larger conversation. Maybe, but I don't really buy that yet. I think Brian Williams he's in sort of this trap and this difficult position where he's sort of stuck between, on the one hand, the kind of, that's the way it is, the kind of Walter Cronkites, the people that he looked up to, the Peter Jennings, right? Interestingly enough, by the way, Tom Brokaw, Peter Jennings, and Brian Williams all failed to graduate college, which is something that they always kind of mention as sort of an indication of their kind of lower class kind of being a part of the everyday working man kind of thing. Brian Williams talks a lot about how he was a volunteer firefighter, how he rescued puppies, and the sort of idea of like, I'm an everyman, I can do any job kind of thing. It's artificial, it's kind of fake, and I think the audience is starting to see that. They're starting to see.
It may be authentic in that he did those things, but it's the presentation of those things that wind up turning them into artifice, right? It's almost like he polishes up those experiences the same way that he polished up the experiences in Iraq because he thinks that it's going to get him better ratings. There's a question about, I can't see into his heart. I don't know whether or not it's his ego or it's his cunning business sense that makes him think, well, if I make my character look like a much more I've had these experiences that have kind of honed my sensibility about the world, and they make me a little bit better and more special for having lived through those things. There's probably a business case there for a broadcaster to do that. The problem is that as I went through all of the different videos and watched them, is that the story kind of morphed. It seemed like, depending upon who he was talking to, he would change some of the details of the story in order to embellish it a little bit. And the problem is that when you're doing that on tape, and
not a smart thing to do.
Yeah, it's somebody said once that if you don't lie, you don't have to worry about what you said to someone.
Well, the issue, I think, is, I think he is a liar, like in the final analysis, and I feel bad for him. I mean, there are lots of things that are inartful statements, right? Or that you remember something incorrectly, or maybe you even hype it up a little bit, right? But there are so many instances with Brian Williams over the years, and what's surprising about it is just that it happens so often with such regularity. And what I found so interesting about it is that, see, he is, to a certain extent, expected to kind of perform the news. And so, like, he'll go and he'll speak in front of an audience, largely liberal audience. The New York speech in 2007, where he's talking to a counterpart from the New York Times, is a good example of this, where he is, he has to give long speeches, he has to be interviewed, and he becomes the focus. And I think that's a really difficult position for somebody who kind of grew up with this idea of, like, 4-minute segments and, doing the news. It's quite easy to be good in 3 minutes, right? Or it's quite easy to be good in, like, a tweet. It's quite more difficult to write a book or to give an elaborate long speech. I noticed this actually recently when I saw Rush Limbaugh speak at an event where, I'm a big fan of Rush Limbaugh. I admire what he's done. Many friends, who work with him. But the speech was pretty bad. I mean, the speech was kind of universally thought of as being kind of bad. And the problem was that he didn't have an obscene profit break. He didn't have that ding. He didn't have the moments where he could go and kind of refresh himself. And I think Brian Williams has this similar problem. But the issue is that he's so funny and charming and frankly good-looking that he gets invited on all these shows. And he's described it himself as kind of a release when he gets to go on Letterman or he gets to go on Jon Stewart. And when he's released, he's sort of cutting back and having kind of a bull session. And the problem is that his brand requires him to be, always be, Mr. Facts. I'm the facts. I'm this. I'm that. And so he'll kind of ping between having like a normal human conversation where he's essentially, BSing somebody, like he would in a bar or like he would among friends. He's kind of pinging between that and I'm Mr. Serious. I'm Mr. This. And so what ends up happening is that disconnect creates a lot of the internal drama, within him, and it also creates a great opportunity to kind of skewer him. And that's what happened here. I mean, he's done now. I mean, the problem is that he may think he can get back, all right? But the issue is that every single thing he did, like, I mean, I've watched maybe 18, 19 hours of Brian Williams tapes over the last week. There's a lot more that I haven't even gotten through yet. I mean, at most, I've maybe hit 5% of the content, 10%.
And how do you decide or find all of this stuff?
Well, a lot of it is sent to us by the GotNews audience to kind of look at and evaluate and make judgments on. But a lot of the times what we'll do is we'll go to a website called worldcat.org, or we'll go to Nexus, or we'll go to all the different kind of content sites. So the Daily Show, for instance. We'll go to that show. We'll go to Charlie Rose. We'll go to anything that's already uploaded. We won't go to the YouTubes of the world just because, frankly, it's kind of easy to go to YouTube nowadays and just find content there. What we're looking for is video that can be archived and pulled down from other places, and then can then be uploaded to the main channels, the YouTubes, your Vimeos, and then that can basically be the focal point where everybody else's eyeballs go. And so that's kind of how I know that people stole the videos from us, because I was the one who found them. They're using the embedded code, or they're and they're not linking to us, or they're not saying .news found this.
Yeah, I was surprised. Your friends over at Gawker actually gave you a hat tip.
They did, and thinking as I've been thinking seriously about suing Gawker for making up a bunch of things about me, that was surprising. It was kind of a nice surprise, but so here's the situation, right? So what's happening now is that people are totally distrusting print, and they have distrusted print for a long time. And part of the reason they've distrusted print is that there's just a proliferation of it, right? That basically you can go and find anyone saying anything you ever would want to find, and you can basically pursue those rabbit holes as deep as you want to go. Now there's some print that you trust more than others, right? Because of reputation or brand. There's other print that you trust because, hey, this is a government document, even though governments lie all the time, right? But what's happening now is that people are really starting to just distrust and find disgusting the presentation of media and video. And video carries so much more nuance to it, because videos can actually disprove a claim in print or a claim made elsewhere like that. And when that starts happening, it becomes really exciting, because what that does is it creates a level playing field where anyone out there who has the time and the patience can actually upend the media narratives that are forming. And so, we've seen this with the Gruber tapes, for instance, where Rich Weinstein was demolishing Jonathan Gruber, and we helped out on that at GotNews, where we produced some of the tapes showing Mitt Romney fibbing, or Mitt Romney rather endorsing Jonathan Gruber. And so we've helped in this kind of process of basically being a curator of all this interesting research or talent that's out there. And I think as time goes on, we want to kind of create a culture of more research, more people kind of being distrustful, more people kind of going after and researching the claims made by government or made by politicians or made by news anchors or made by the scientific community. And I think the internet really frees us up in that way. Now, the problem of it, though, is that it also gives an opportunity for a lot of the cranks out there, like the Little Green Footballs of the world or others. It gives them an opportunity as well. And so the problem is that you're kind of stuck in this kind of weird place where you can debunk things on the one hand, but you also have to deal with the fact that a lot of people don't want you to debunk things. If you're starting to break stories that no one else is reading or no one else wants to exist, what they'll do is they'll call you a crackpot. They'll call you a nutbag. I mean, I'm trying to remember all the slurs and things that are used.
That's kind of a tell, isn't it? I watched something the other day.
Yeah, the Cheryl Atkinson video.
Yeah, Cheryl Atkinson was talking about how you can always tell when astroturfing is going on because that's when the name calling starts.
Right, and there's this essay that I really like by Paul Graham, who I think is a VC or something, where he talks about it's called "What You Can't Say," and this essay in particular, he goes through and he says, like, look, we have fashion, right, and fashion changes over time, which is like why when you look back at the videos of yourself a while back, you look kind of silly or you look kind of weird, but so do moral fashions exist too. So, like in this country, like we have this view for a long time that going to a lynching was a totally normal occurrence, or burning a witch, and we have those moral fashions today too. We call them taboos. We call them. I mean, they're a whole slew of what we call them. But whenever somebody's attacking an argument, the strongest attack against it can be, "Hey, that's false. That's not true. That's not objective reality." Now, you may still lose because the person you're saying, "Hey, that's false, that's bogus," whatever, might have 100,000 or 200,000 or 500,000 Twitter followers who could all come and attack you. But nonetheless, it's still a fact of life. And so what I like to do is I like to look for the taboos within the society because that's where a lot of the drama exists. And so, like with the Cheryl Atkinson thing, where she's talking about the astroturfing and how people are targeted. I mean, I've been called a conspiracy theorist by people who I used to work with at the Wall Street Journal editorial page after I exposed the Elizabeth O'Baggy story and debunked it. But this is kind of how it is in this culture. And so, I'm not interested in an argument being sexist or racist or homophobic or any of the number of taboos that the society currently has, because they're just not all that interesting to me. I mean, I think that basically whenever somebody now claims, to language police, and to basically what they'll do is they'll say, oh, that's that's racist, or that's heteronormative, or whatever the phrase du jour is. What they're doing is they're putting into the discourse their own power. Like, so you can't really reply to somebody who calls you a racist. You can't just be like, hey, that what you're saying right here isn't true, or isn't. Well, you can't say to them like, hey, racism, sexism, homophobia, those are real problems, but you're actually like exercising power against the discourse here, because you don't want people to actually analyze this and kind of come to their own conclusions. So you can't really do that in this day and age, because there are certain taboos that you just can't touch. And the more you touch these taboos, the more angry people get. And so what they'll do is they'll say that you're a racist, or you hate women, or you out-rape victims, or whatever. And that's what they do. I mean, this is the standard approach. But what we're trying to do at GotNews is we're trying to basically liberate people to think for themselves. They may think that that I'm an asshole, or that they may think whatever they want about me. But what I like to do is I like to present them the documents, the videos, the analysis that really they can't really argue with. Like, you can ignore some of the videos that we put up. It's totally fine to do that, but nonetheless, it does make it clear that Brian Williams is a liar and a fraud. I wish that it were other, because frankly, like, I think he's kind of funny. Maybe he should go and do like a comedy routine, or maybe he should go. I mean, he's often said that his daughter's a really talented actress and how he admires her and looks up to her. Maybe he should do something similar.
I'm gonna ask you one more question, and then I think we should probably wrap this up. You use the word "we" a lot, and people criticize you for using the word "we," and I just thought that maybe you would talk to that a little bit, because the perception of GotNews, because Charles C. Johnson's name is on virtually every post on the site, is that you're a little windbag who's sitting in your room doing all this stuff by yourself, and you've got delusions of grandeur whenever you use the word "we." So you want to talk about that?
I have delusions of adequacy is another attack that has been made against me. No, look, I mean, I am speaking for a generation of researchers that are emerging right now, and perhaps it's wrong to speak of them, but oftentimes I'm describing a tendency and a pattern of people. GotNews, the company that I own, it exists in large measure because there are people out there who have interesting research and content that they want the world to see, that they want to have their Rich Weinstein, Jonathan Gruber moment. And there are all these people out there. Like, there are so many, and many of them are anonymous. Many of them hide behind Twitter handles, fake names. Many of them live in parts of the country, in Alaska or rural Georgia or what have you, that don't really get a lot of attention. And these people are really changing the country. They're changing the face of the country. And what I've done is I've gotten kind of in front of that, and I've shown my face, and I've kind of built a news company around these types of people. And because of that, I've taken on a lot of attacks. I've been public. I've publicly exposed myself and, frankly, my family and others to a lot of attacking. And so the "we", I think basically that you earn the "we" when your company actually continues. And a company can just be a collection of individuals, right? I mean, quite literally, that's what it means, like a company of X, or a band of Y, or a flock of whatever. And so, like, in this particular case, like, it is clear that I'm the representative of a generation, but not exclusively a generation of millennials, because I think there are a lot of people who are Gen Xers and others who are just tired of the media, tired of the government, tired of various people just lying and making stuff up. And so, this is a difficult position to be in because oftentimes it requires you to be a bit bombastic with your technique. It requires you to be
Well,
a bit.
it's kind of like whoever Tyler Durden is on on I'm spacing on Zero Hedge. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, look, part of the
Tyler Durden may be one person. Tyler Durden may be, somebody who's fronting a lot of work that a lot of other people are doing.
right.
Anyway,
No, it's the same. It's the same sort of thing on the GotNews, which is that I am. I obviously invest my brand and my own reputation in a lot of this stuff because that's why I often put my name on it. But oftentimes, like, anonymous, I think would be a lot more effective if it actually had somebody out there who was claiming to actually be anonymous. Otherwise, it starts to splinter and it becomes confusing and it's not really clear who's doing what. Same thing with ISIS. I think most movements and most groups of people need a face. Julian Assange was.
I think that's probably the weakness of the Tea Party at the current moment is that what is the Tea Party? I mean, who's taking responsibility for all of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right?
No, and oftentimes leaders emerge either through by their own design, right? So a lot of the times they'll be people will be going in one direction, right? And they'll be forming a march, and politicians or social leaders will run to the front of that march and claim to be leading it, when in fact they're co-opting it. And so you have to be very, very clear that you aren't co-opting. That you aren't co-opting the movement. That you're really allowing the movement to speak for itself. And I think as time goes on, more and more people will start to become researchers, and rather than consumers of news. What they'll do is they'll be starting to produce and analyze things. So one of our mutual friends, anonymously went after and took out Dan Rather. And he was part of the team of researchers that debunked it. And he had a lot of expertise in the early Selectric typewriters. At least I think that's how you said Selectric. I don't know.
Oh, like IBM Selectrics, yeah.
IBM Selectric typewriters. I've never actually touched one of them, so I don't know. But basically, there's a whole.
They were the bomb.
They were the bomb. Well, anyway, so this guy who was an expert in them realized that the Rathergate memos were fake, and he was just doing his thing, going to corporate offices or whatever. And he, along with a bunch of other people, realized they were fake, and together they all got together and they took out Dan Rather, which I think was the beginning of the end of the network news. Now it's sort of playing out. Now we have sort of a Gen X equivalent of Dan Rather, which is in the form of Brian Williams. But I see this happening more and more and more. Particularly this idea of an objective journalist. I think people are increasingly going to dispute it. Then there's going to be basically it's going to increasingly be a sort of war of all against all. And I don't know that this will be good for the Republic or for the media in the final analysis, but I do think that that's the trend it's going in. And so you're seeing this already with people who have massive Twitter campaigns to get somebody's book deal canceled or get them to lose their TV show or what have you, or to target their advertisers. And so I think that this approach is going to continue as time goes on because it's going to be very fascinating to kind of see as it plays out. And Brian Williams, I think, in many respects, is a victim. Obviously he chose and he made all these claims, and he's made up a bunch of other stuff. But he's a victim in some respects because the times have really passed by his profession, and they're going to increasingly do this to many, many different groups of people. Now, I'm
going to stop you.
Oh, okay.
Because you're rambling.
Oh, I'm rambling. All right, my bad.
You're rambling. I think that as we continue to do this, we should probably get an hourglass, something analog.
All right then.
Yeah.
Thank you for being the moderator.
Yeah, exactly. But what I thought that maybe what we should touch on is that we're going to keep doing these things, and so that it's not an hour-long exercise of having Charles pontificate that perhaps that we could get some other guests on here. So if
Yeah.
if anybody's interested in being a guest on the show, how do they get in touch with you?
At Chuck C. Johnson on Twitter or editor at GotNews.com. And I'd love to have people on here who are exactly like what we're talking about, who are people who are breaking news and doing things in a new way that no one else has done. And we'll give them their 15 gigabytes of fame or maybe 15 years of being a researcher or more. And we'd really like to kind of invite the audience to both produce and obviously consume the content as time goes on.
Yeah, and obviously we'll be checking the comments below and subscribe to this channel and all the other YouTube blah blah blah. And do you have any final words, Charles?
No, I'm just very excited. I'm excited at what's just happened with Brian Williams, and I think it's going to be lots more fun as time goes on. And I really want to go and research Lester Holt right now, who's going to be Brian Williams' temporary. We'll see how temporary that is. His temporary replacement for a bit.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later, Charles.
Be well, Peter. Bye.
Bye.